Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, even though we're not going anywhere these days, sometimes you've got to travel for the good stuff. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brains on current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more. If you'd like to subscribe, to the podcast, and I mean, we hope that you would, you're listening, you can do that basically wherever you find your podcasts. Amazon, Google, Spotify, Apple, it's all good. And you can also find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In The Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and I dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In The Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, and, well, anything else we can really think of, to be perfectly honest. Because that's how we roll. Because we love talking about the moving image. And speaking of which, we're actually heading down to South by Southwest for the film festival. And we get to talk about a film that just had its premiere. It is called The Spine of Night, and it is this ultra-violent, truly epic fantasy rotoscoped animation piece of glorious brilliance that is playing in the festival as part of Video on Demand, as well for the festival anyway. But we got to sit down and talk with writer-directors Phillip Gelatt and Morgan Galen King about the film, about the process of doing it, and it was a lot of fun, and I certainly hope you enjoy our talk, because I know I did. All right, well, obviously, first off, guys, thank you for the time, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Now, I mean, fuck, man, the movie's wild. I love it. Walk me through sort of the inspiration, sort of the origin of the story for you guys.
Oh, well, the inspiration, it sort of just it was born out of wanting to find like a playground that we could tell stories in the aesthetic of these the films that it's drawing on, like the Bakshi films and heavy metal and such. So like in figuring out the workflow, like the animation pipeline, I'd spent a couple of years doing short films, and then eventually Exordium was one that sort of made the rounds a little bit on the internet that made its way to Phil.
Yeah, so I saw Morgan's short film Exordium and was immediately sort of in love with it from both an aesthetic perspective and from like how it treats fantasy, like it's sort of like a low fantasy psychedelic thing, right? So I was like, oh, this is the best thing I've seen all year. I want to make this. So I sent an email to Morgan, and we started talking and trying to figure out what we could do together, and quickly settled on, oh, well, let's take Exordium and turn it into a feature. Let's, explore that world that Morgan had sort of been playing with and build it out into this wild thing. And then also do it in as uncompromising a way as possible, right? Because that's like, why make a rotoscope fantasy film if you're not going to make it as it truly in the style of those movies, I guess. Yeah.
No, I mean, I love it. I mean, obviously the Bakshi influences are obvious, and I mean, it's one of those things where, especially these days, when we think of animation, we think of these sort of armies of people sort of at computers. I'm kind of fascinated how you guys sort of achieved sort of this old school style using new school technology.
Well, I mean, we very much looked to how they made the older films. We shot live action reference footage in a warehouse. We shot the entire film live action, edited the live action, and then exported that out into frames to then do it in a pretty traditional manner. They're done with it's frame by frame, hand drawn with keyframes and onion skins, like most like they would have done it. There's new technology that approximates it, but I think to really get or at least I hope to capture the magic of what made those so awesome to me as a kid, to do it the hand drawn hard way.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, we it was very hard to find animators who could do the style that we were after. And then if we did find them, the ones that were willing to do sort of the back-breaking work for hours on end to actually do it. So we ended up with like a very like winnowed down core team of I think it ended up what, 4 animators, right? I think is the it ended up being the core team that
Wow.
handled the bulk of it. So yeah, I mean not easy, basically. Basically is the answer. Yeah.
No, I mean, I love the voice casting in this because, especially for a film like this, it feels like you have to sort of manage and sort of send out some very sort of designated pitches because obviously you could do a wide swath and read a bunch of people, but if you send the right pitch to the right person, you're going to get them to do it for scale probably because you got some really nice names in here, and it feels very much like a almost like a fan dream come through, especially not just for you guys, but maybe for some of the voice actors as well, to be able to be a part of something like this.
Yeah, I mean, so we, as you say, our casting, we did the big voice casting we did at the end of the process, so or towards the end of the process. So the animation was near completion, which figures into the story of how we got the people. You know, we were able to, when we started to do it, think very curatorial about the people who might really get what this is and love it, right? So like we were like, oh, who might like a violent fantasy genre film? And like an obvious answer is like Joe Manganiello might love that because he loves D&D and he has his like he likes sort of extreme genre artwork and has that death saves thing, like just felt very much his thing. So he was one of the first people we approached, and obviously said that he would like to come on and do it. When we met him to record with him, his comment was, oh, I saw the first 5 minutes of the animation and I was like, oh, crazy people made this and I want to work with crazy people. So I was like, oh, that's great, Joe. We are crazy and we're happy to have you join us. So and a similar thing with Patton. I mean, Patton's upfront about his love of fantasy and those types of things. So for Lucy, I mean, she's just sort of like genre royalty in a certain sense. So she just made sense as a person to approach. I was very nervous that she, wouldn't like it or wouldn't take to it, but she really did. And when we were recording with her, well, so before we were recording, we did a couple, like talked to her a couple of times about the character and how she was going to treat it, those kinds of things. And she, really had, found the character and identified with Zod in a certain way and wanted to make sure that, she felt different than Xena and her other roles. And like, it was really, really fantastic. They're all a lot of fun to work with. Yeah, just great stuff.
How do you guys feel about the rollout of a film like this being now? Because I mean, obviously, you're not going to get sort of the full-on festival experience once it premieres, but there is that light at the end of the tunnel, just from a global standpoint, that we're going to be able to sort of be sitting together in a dark room, watching a film like this, sort of the way it's meant to be seen. And I mean, this almost feels like the aspirational movie to me for audiences in so many ways. I'm kind of curious. I mean, because obviously you can't plan this, but I'm just curious, like, about your perspectives on sort of this being one of the first movies to maybe get us out of what we've been in for the past year and a bit.
Oh,
Well,
I mean,
do you want to take that, or do you want
I
me
mean,
to
I hope so. I hope that
Yeah.
that things do open up. Like, I mean, certainly the dream is to have it like as a midnight film that people put on and know the words to, and are getting stoned to for decades to come. I would be flattered if it made its way out into darkened theaters as the pandemic finally abates and people can go see it. Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. It's weird to have it premiere at a virtual festival. I am choosing to think of it as cool though, because it feels very much like it's like a new, interesting way to engage in a film festival, and we're all very used to watching things at home right now. Anyway, so it feels fine to me. I am very much hoping though that we will end up in theaters. I think it is. I mean, I think it's a movie you could enjoy at home, but I think probably it is a movie that would be best served by, as you say, a group of strangers in a dark room together, experiencing it big, because it is, it's meant to be transportative. It's meant to pull you into a weird fantasy world, and I think that's, I don't know. I'm a theater person myself, so I hope that it ends up there.
No, I
knock
mean,
on
I'm in
wood.
Toronto, and I mean, I just about 20 minutes in, I couldn't help but get the feeling like, my God, the crowd would be going nuts at TIFF if this was playing right now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have that experience.
Now, I mean, I'm kind of curious for both of you, like what got you started into this business? Because I mean, this film is really almost pushing back on the modern convention and sort of paying homage to the older convention of not just animation but storytelling in general. Because I mean, it's fantasy, but it's gory, it's bloody, it's violent as hell.
Yeah. I mean, so I have been working in film for a while now, and one of the reasons that Morgan's short film spoke to me specifically was for exactly what you say. It felt uncompromising. It felt old. It felt like for a long time I was using the term like it was like a discarded aesthetics, like it even like discarded like narrative forms, like things that movie culture and TV culture had like sort of discarded as no longer useful and not something that we make anymore. So, and I love that stuff. So one of the reasons I wanted to make this movie in particular was because of that, like to make a movie that was, I just keep using this word, uncompromising in terms of, I mean, across the board, but a lot of what I do is screenwriting. So from my perspective, being able to make a fantasy film and write it in an uncompromising way and do things that I mean, not to talk bad about Hollywood, but like no producer that I know would ever let you write a movie like this at all. Like view it from any perspective at all, and they would say no. Like don't like you need to have a through line that's like a who's your main character through the course of the movie. Well, that we have one, but we also don't have one. Like there's just again any angle you approach it from, I think we would be shot down. And that's from a narrative perspective, forgetting ignoring even like the content perspective of like the nudity and the gore and stuff. So yeah, I mean, as you say, it is meant to be, it's meant to take an older style of fantasy filmmaking and like dust it off, like remove the things that are problematic or no longer useful for the 21st century and be like, here's a way to make a thing that's cool. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like trying to capture the, like in terms of films I want to see, there was a void around this whole area. I mean, I think that there's like a South Park episode that makes fun of heavy metal, but there's almost like nothing since this era that really tries to even do this, or to evoke this. I mean, there's the occasional music video here and there that looks back to that era, but yeah, I mean, it was a thing that didn't exist, and I was, when I was pursuing animation, as a career, it was definitely like the thing I wanted to exist in the world again.
Now, I mean, this is something I'm always curious about because, I mean, obviously the rotoscoping process does not get used all that often, if only because it's a labor-intensive pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious for both of you, what is it about sort of that process that is sort of creatively engaging?
I love that I love cartooning too. I mean, I think it's a wonderful aesthetic as well, but rotoscoping in particular just like grounds it in the human experience in a way that I really appreciate. Like bodies react to physical things in a semi-realistic way. Like the proportions are managed by reality, so that I think then when you have things like violent trauma, like it hits a little harder, more like a horror film and less like Looney Tunes. So like it keeps it adds a gravitas to that is, I think, a cartoonier style abstracts from even more.
Right.
And I think it is probably a reason that all of those old movies also leaned into nudity, in that like being able to actually see the human form it's pretty weird to see a naked cartoon character in a way that I think you get more of like the primal humanity out of a realistically proportioned rotoscope human being.
My answer is Morgan's answer on that one. I think he nailed it.
No, you're right. There is this sort of there is this sort of off-putting realism to it, but it really sort of gets you into the story. And I mean, I think that's the magic of this, because especially like with those Bashki films in the past and this, as much as it's fantasy, as much as it's completely off the wall, there still is this element of sort of raw blood and guts humanity that kind of comes through the screen. And I mean, I think that's what happened in Spine of Night. And fuck, man, I love this movie. And congratulations again, both. I think it's going to go off like fucking gangbusters when the world gets to see it. Honest to God, man, congratulations. This is it's a hell of a feat.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's awesome.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.